Hi all, this is lecture 13 on our integers with multiplication and division. So what we want to do is we want to find a conceptual approach to represent multiplication and division of integers. And the chips get a little bit complicated. There are some aspects of these two operations that we can do, but it can get a little confusing when we try to do all of the things with our chips. So we're going to stick to number lines. And we're going to think about using some of the things that we did with addition, because with addition, um, we're able to add a single number, but with multiplication, it's repeated addition. So instead of just adding that amount of things one time, we're going to add that amount of things multiple times. And so it's going to look similar in structure. We're still going to look in a certain direction. We're going to move in a certain direction. We're just going to do it repeatedly. Okay. And the way we're going to do it is this. We're going to have our first integer represent two things. So this integer here is going to represent where we look. Okay. We're either, just like last time, going to look at the positives or the negatives. Okay, just so that our grammar is correct there. You're imagining standing on the number line, and you're either going to look in the direction of the positives or look in the direction of the negatives. This is also going to tell you your jump size. Okay, so just like we moved five, like if you were adding five, you would move 5 spaces. Now you're going to jump that you're going to make that your jump size, and we're going to repeat that a certain number of times. The second integer is going to represent two things as well. It's going to represent the way that we move. So its sign is going to tell you to either move forwards or backwards. So if the sign of that second integer is positive, you're going to move forwards or with your arrow. And if that integer is negative, you're going to move backwards, opposite your arrow. The other thing it's going to tell you is the number of jumps that you're going to make. Okay. And that's where the repeatedness of it, the repeated addition comes into play, right? Because this essentially means add 3 2 times, right? So we're going to add a jump size of 3 in 2 different times, right? Repeated twice. And then the direction, the signs are going to tell us the positives and the negatives, and then where we look and where we move. Okay. So in this particular case, now also the other thing we're going to do is we are always going to start from 0, right? We have nothing going on. We're going to start from the middle, and then we are going to move in the way that this says. So when I see 3 times 2, we are going to always start at 0. And that's because we're multiplying. Okay. So we're going to start at 0 because we're multiplying. We are going to look at the positives because that first 3 is positive. Right? So because of the positive 3, we're going to move forwards on this one. And that's because your 2 is positive. And then we're going to go 2 jumps of size 3. Now, there is nothing about this that is kind of um, conceptually attached to either of those values, right? Multiplication is commutative. You can switch the order. So 3 times 2 and 2 times 3 should be exactly the same thing. So you can actually switch the roles here. I assign them this way just because when we get to division, it kind of works a little bit better. And it's consistent with what we're gonna do in division. Okay. And so we're gonna go ahead and execute this on our number line. So we are going to start right here at 0, put my green dot for my starting point. And then we are going to look at the positive. So I am going to point an arrow towards the positive numbers. And then we're going to move in that same direction. So we're going to start at our green dot. We're going to move with our arrow because we're moving forwards. And we're going 2 jumps of size 3. So 1 jump of size 3, 2 jumps of size 3. And this is our answer. So our answer is positive 6, right? Your answer is where you land. Okay. So for that one, 3 times 2, we're looking at starting at 0, looking at the positives, moving forward, 2 jumps of size 3, and we land on 6, which is exactly what we expected. Let's look at another one. So now let's try to mix a negative number in here. So we've got 5 times negative 2. So because this is multiplication, we are going to start at 0. We are going to take a look at that first integer, and that 5 is positive, and that's going to tell us to look at the positives because our 5 is positive. And we are going to move backwards. We are moving backwards because the 2 is a negative 2. Okay. tells us to move backwards. And then we are going to go 2 jumps of size 5, right? That first number is your jump size, and the second number is your number of jumps. The value of the second integer is your number of jumps. And so let's go ahead and execute that. So we're starting at 0. And you are looking at the positive. So my arrow again points at the positive numbers. But now we're going backwards. So we're going to be moving opposite that arrow. So started our green dot, move opposite our arrow, and we're going 2 jumps of size 5. So 1 jump of size 5, 2 jumps of size 5. We're landing right here at -10. Okay, so the place where we land is our answer. And of course, for me, you're going to go ahead and turn these notes into full sentences. So it's a paragraph explanation of what you're doing. Okay. Let's look at another one. -3 times 4. So same kind of thing here. You're going to start at 0. We are going to look at the negative. Then we're going to move forward because our 4 is positive. Then we are going 4 jumps of size 3. So if we execute that here on our number line, we've got our starting spot at 0. We are going to look at the negative numbers. So our arrow points this way. And we're going to go with that arrow because we're moving forwards and we're going 4 jumps of size 3. So 3, 3, 3. And we don't have enough. So let's add a couple spaces here. One more 3 takes us to -12. And our answer is -12. Okay. And then one last multiplicative example here. We've got -2 times -2. We are going to erase whatever this was. And then we're going to start at 0. We are going to look at the negatives because of the -2. Okay. You're going to move backwards because of the other -2. And we're going 2 jumps of size 2. So starting at 0, we are looking at the negatives. So our arrow points to the negatives, but we're going backwards. So going opposite that arrow, 2 jumps of size 2. There's 1 and 2, and we're landing here at 4. Okay, so regardless of um, whether we're multiplying 2 negatives, 2 positives, 1 negative, as long as we follow that set of rules, we will end up in the exact correct space. So that's our multiplication. So I'm going to jump down a page, okay, to where it says rules for integers for multiplication. We use the following rules to multiply integers with number lines. So our rules here, number 1, we always start at 0. For multiplication, we always start at 0. Number 2, the first integer, or actually, let's change that. The sign of the first integer tells you where to look. Tells you to look at the positives or negatives, depending on what its sign is. So if it's positive, it's going to tell you to look at the positives. If it's negatives, you're going to look at the negatives. Okay. All right, so we've always started 0, and the sign of the first integer tells us to look at the positives or negatives. It also tells us the value of the first integer. I apologize for any background noise. I'm recording this dance for my little girls. The value of the first integer is the jump size. Then the second integer. So the sign of the second integer The sign of the second integer tells us to move forwards or backwards. And the value of the second integer is the number of jumps. Mhm. So we always start at 0. The sign of the first integer tells us to look at the positives or negatives, and the value of the first integer is the jump size. The sign of the second integer tells us to move forwards or backwards, depending on its sign, and the value of the second integer is the number of jumps. For some reason, I had two number twos. And our last thing is that the answer is where you land. Okay, and those are our steps for multiplication. All right, now we want to go back and look at some examples of division. Okay. Now, the thing that gets tricky about division is that our standard ways to do things, splitting things into groups or sharing into groups or measurement, doesn't really work very well for negative numbers, right? When you have to, 'cause you can't have a negative group. You can share negative chips, but you can't share them into negative groups, and so that kind of gets a little bit tricky. So we are going to actually say, I don't want to think conceptually about division. What I want to use is the fact that multiplication and division are um, inverse operations. So I know that I can write 6 divided by 3 as 3 times some number gives me 6. And that way, if I interpret it this way and I use what I know from the last set of examples, we can go ahead and figure this out. So in this setup, right, switching to 3 times box gives me 6. Then that 3 tells me where to look and the jump size. The 6 is my answer to the multiplication problem. So that's where I have to land. I like to call that my target. And then the answer here to the division question is actually that missing factor in multiplication, and that's how you get there. So how did you move in order to get to your target? So in terms of setup, we're thinking we've switched this to multiplication. So we're going to start at 0 because that's what we do for multiplication. We start at 0. And then we're going to look at the positives because that 3 is positive. The same way we would interpret it if we were multiplying, because that's how it's written. We're also going to know that our jump size is 3, right? Because that's the value of the first integer. And then the 6 tells us that that is our target. So target is 6. Okay. And the way I set this up on my number line looks something like this. So we're still starting with our 0. So we're starting at 0. We're still going to draw that arrow for where we look. So we're going to look in the direction of the positive numbers. And then we know that our target is 6. And then what I like to do is I like to draw a downward arrow for my target. So I know I'm aiming for right there. And the answer to my problem, the division problem, is how do I get from the green dot to the red arrow? So my jump size is 3. So I need to use a jump size of 3 and get from my green dot to the red arrow. So oops, no, we erased. So we need to jump in size of 3. So 1 jump size 3, and then 2 jumps of size 3, 2 jumps of size 3. So how did we get from the green dot to the red arrow? Well, we did 2 jumps. And did we go with our arrow or opposite our arrow? Well, we had to go with the arrow, so that's forwards. So we went 2 jumps forwards. And when we go 2 jumps forwards, that means our answer is positive 2, because that's how we would have interpreted the number positive 2 if we were multiplying. Okay, so your answer is how you get from the green dot to the red arrow. Okay, let's look at another one. Guys. Hey guys, I'm recording a video. Can we keep it down a little bit? Nope, apparently not. All right, sorry about that, friends. We are going to switch to multiplication. So -4 times some number gives us 8. Okay, what does that mean? We are going to start at 0. We are going to look at the negatives. We are going to have a target. All right, and that we're looking at the negatives because that 4 is negative. And our target here is 8. And we are going to have a jump size of 4, okay, because that's the value of our first integer. And so we're going to start at 0. We are going to look at the negative numbers. So my arrow is going to, we are going to look in the direction of the negative numbers. So my arrow is going to point at the negatives. And then my target is positive 8. So I've got to go over here to the right. So I've got to get from my green dot to my red arrow. And I've got to do that in jump size of 4. So there's 1 jump of size 4 and 2 jumps of size 4. And that means we did 2 jumps, but this time we went opposite the arrow. So we went backwards. And that means my answer is -2. Mhm. All right, and we got 2 more left. So let's take a look at -10 divided by -2. And so we're going to switch this to -2 times some number gives us -10. And that means we're going to start at 0 because it's multiplication. We are going to look at the negatives. And we are going to have a target of -10. And the jump size this time is 2. It's the value of that first integer. Okay, so we're looking at the negatives because the 2 is negative, and we've got our target of -10. So we are going to start at 0. We're going to look at the direction of the negatives, and we are headed for -10. So -10 is over here, and we're going in jumps in size 2 from our green dot to our red arrow. So I keep going in 2s until I get there. And then the answer is, how did I get there? Well, I get that there using 5 jumps. And we went with the arrow this time, so forwards. And that means our answer is +5. Okay. And last one here before I give our little summary is we will change this to multiplication. So 2 times box gives us -8. And that means that we are starting at 0. We are going to look at the positives because the 2 is positive. We are going to aim for the -8. That's our target. So your target here is -8. And your jump size is 2 again. So again, you're starting here at 0. We are going to look at the positives. So I want my arrow to point in the direction of the positive numbers. But I'm headed to -8. And I can tell you right away, give you a hint about what the sign of our answer is going to be. But we are headed from the green dot to the red arrow in jumps of size 2. Okay. And how did I get there? I used 4 jumps. And we went opposite the arrow this time. So that opposite the arrow means backwards. And that tells us that your answer here is -4. 4 jumps backwards is -4. Mhm. All right. So for rules for division, number 1, you're going to switch to multiplication. Right? And that is then the factor, which you only have 1. The factor tells you where to look and the jump size. The product, which is the answer to your multiplication, is your target. That's where you have to land. Again, I did two twos. And then your answer is how you get from 0 to your target. Okay. So that's how we're going to handle these, and take a look at the guided practice for more examples.